We are back for day two. Welcome back, everybody. We are doing day two, part two of the big 8 cuisines of China. So in part one, we did the first four, which were the initial kind of like big 4 regions that China had designated as its cuisine capitals. And that was done between 600 to 900 during the Tang Dynasty. And then Qing Dynasty, the last dynasty of China, broke up the country and kind of added 4 more of these regional provinces that really exemplify the cuisines of China. So we did the big 4 first. Now we are doing kind of the other half of it. Definitely go back to the first one to watch a little bit of the intro, because we did a little bit of background just, on China, on how they divided up everything. But the reason that we're doing this, particularly for our channel, is because we do work with, or I do work with, so many recipes. We end up having like a lot of just disparate recipes where you're like, oh, well, how come that's Chinese food and that's Chinese food, and yet that one tastes completely differently, or that one uses completely different ingredients or different cooking methods. Because China has had so many iterations of itself, some of the, like the modern foods of today, they were really created, within the last couple 100 years. And so it's not always that you see kind of like a direct relation to what we're talking about. But I think what it is when you take a big step back, and you're like, okay, we're comparing this region to this region, you can definitely see that there's a difference, and that, various things influenced different regions as well. So what I will do for the 4 individual provinces left today is we'll take a look at their climate, their geography, their kind of cultural, historical influences, and then we'll talk about some of the more known dishes of the area. We'll talk about the cooking style a little bit as well, maybe some of the ingredients that are used, and just kind of see if we can fit something together. Sometimes they do, and sometimes it's just modern and nothing correlates. So first region that we're going to talk about today is Zhejiang, and that is along that eastern coast of China. And we talked about yesterday, first thing to get yourself acquainted with when we're talking about these 8 regions is to just look at the map. Look at a map, kind of vaguely know where they are. That is like the first thing when you're trying to understand a place. It's just know where they are. What you'll find is that a majority of the big 8 cuisines are along this eastern coast of China. And that makes sense because you have the water, you have the sea that's going to bring in fish, that's going to bring in, various foods, but also the sea brings in trade. So there's going to be a lot of important ports along this eastern coast. So it makes sense why these are more of the influential areas of China. Zhejiang, home to, some interesting facts, home to Shaoxing yellow wine, which we use a lot of in cooking. A lot of good teas are also produced in this region. So you'll see that when we talk about some of the known foods from the area, that they use tea in their cooking of these. It's home to Alibaba headquarters. Maybe that's one of the big things. Hangzhou, Westlake. Hangzhou, big city, very influential historically, but it's also a place with pretty lakes. And so when you see that, there's going to be various like fish and aquatic life from that, and that will influence the food as well. Land-wise, 70% of the land is hills. It's mainly hilly. It's higher in altitude towards the south and the west. So what that means is even within these regions, province, they're huge. So within each one, there's going to be different climates. There's going to be different, landscapes. There's going to be different people, groups living there. So when we kind of generalize, like, okay, this is Zhejiang, sometimes we are very much temperatures, January temperatures, 2 to 8, degrees Celsius, 36 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit. So okay, I would say like okay mild. July temperatures are between 27 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is 80 to 86. Rainfall, plenty in the summer, and at the end there's a typhoon. South of Shanghai, this is also known as the land of fish and rice. So yesterday we talked about Jiangsu, which was a little bit north of Shanghai, and then now we're just working down the coast, but this coast also known as the land of fish and rice. So Hangzhou was the capital of the Southern Song dynasty. So whenever dynasties move into particular cities, they bring kind of the wealth, they bring a certain sophistication. This area has rivers that run through it. It has the grand canals that end in Hangzhou. So there's a lot of fertile areas around this region as well, so you're able to grow a lot of things. When people talk about the Zhejiang province, they usually break down the cuisine further into 3 different groups. And so you have Hangzhou cuisine, which is kind of north, but like center. It's to the west. You have Shaoxing cuisine, which is in the middle, and then Ningbo, which is towards the eastern coast. So for Hangzhou cuisine, people usually say that it is famous for its sweet and sour sauces and its use of bamboo shoots. Shaoxing is home to, obviously, the iconic rice wine, lots of use of poultry and fish. And I hate when they bring these things up because I kind of feel like a lot of regions are like, yes, uses poultry and fish, so no different. And then you have Ningbo, which is towards the coast, and it's known for more of its like salty seafood dishes. Qing Dynasty, during the Opium Wars, Zhejiang held many international ports that were eventually opened to foreigners. So kind of just like Shanghai, you're going to kind of maybe see different cultural influences here and there. I know we talked about like with Shanghai, there's like a schnitzel, there's a borscht. So different cultures there, different influences there. Foods that are well known. We have the Westlake fish in vinegar, so kind of that sweet and salty vibe. Dongpo pork, which is kind of this red cooked braised kind of pork belly dish, which I feel like we see in other places as well. But anyways, that is what's famous for. Fried shrimp with the Longjing tea. So cooking with tea, it's a big region for tea. Beggar's chicken, which it is essentially this chicken that is wrapped in, let's say, like a lotus leaf, and then you wrap clay in it, and then you bake it, and it's very impressive looking. Actually, it looks delicious. For my past life, there's different stories with beggar's chicken. Beggar's chicken is also associated with a couple other regions in China as well. So, sometimes they'll say like, oh, legend was that, a beggar didn't have a house and then didn't have an oven and stole the chicken and then, threw it into a pit and just fired it. So, it's just stories like that. It's also very well known for Jinhua ham. It's a cured fermented ham. So Jinhua ham is really interesting too, and we talked about this yesterday, but as I go through each of the regions, I would like to go into each region and do a more in-depth look at it, because this is so wide, and yet this video is so long, right? I'm so sorry. Jinhua ham, there's like a legend has it that like this region typically floods very often, and so when people had to leave because of the floods, they would come back to like pigs that were like drowned essentially in seawater and in the mud, and and then that's the birth of Jinhua ham. There's like little stories like that are interesting. It's probably not true, because mainly, when you don't take the inner organs out of food, they just go really bad. So chances are they didn't eat that, or it would have been like diseased. But anyways, I like stories like that so that we can kind of like, look into it some more. All right, next region, we're talking about Fujianese cuisine. This is the Ming cuisine. We talked about yesterday how just because it's Fujian, it's not just Fujianese cuisine. Sometimes the type of cuisine is given a different name, and usually it's from various people that might have lived there or from historical times. So with the Min, it's Minnan, and it's like a Hokkien group from Fujian. And I also think that it was vaguely named after a river. Fujian is very interesting. So this is a region, if we look on the map, that is southeastern China. It's a big maritime port. But the interesting thing with Fujian is its geography. So it's pretty much three sides surrounded by mountain, and then the other side is surrounded by water. So because of this, this location and all of the mountains, this is a region that was very difficult for people to invade into. And so for this reason, there are still a lot of kind of like traditional ways and groups of people in Fujian that have been, let's say, less tampered with historically. In Chinese, traditionally, it's said that Fujian is 8 parts mountain, 1 part water, and 1 part farmland. I mean, it's not really a saying, it was just describing it. So it's an interesting region. Also, right next to Fujian across the water is Taiwan. So a lot of Taiwanese cuisine actually takes from Fujian as well. They are pretty much neighbors. A lot of people have traveled from Fujian over to Taiwan. You'll actually see a lot of influences of Fujianese cuisine in like Singapore, in Malaysia, like so Southeast Asia, and then Taiwan. You'll see a lot of the sharing of kind of recipes and flavors and ingredients and whatnot. This region, subtropical climate, we're getting quite south into the game. And in the winters, it doesn't get too cold, and then in the summers, very, very hot. Obviously with this region, rich seafood culture. A lot of shellfish, turtles you'll see. They like their soups. Thick and thin is what it says, and here is yet another region that says you cannot have a meal without soup. So you might see a lot of like soup influences there. Light, fresh, a little sweet and sour. Takes from the mountains, which they have, and the sea. I have a note here that they use red rice wine to make a lot of drunken dishes in Fujian, so that will be interesting to explore as we go along. Some of the famous foods from Fujian. There's one called Buddha Jumps Over the Wall. I've never heard of this before, but apparently very big, and it's like, you'd think it's vegetarian, but it's abalone ham, fish maw, shark's fin, which they might not use today. And I guess like the legend has it that like somebody made a dish that was outside of a Buddhist temple, and it was so delicious that one person climbed over the wall and then went to eat it, which yeah, it's just stories. 3 cups chicken. So I think it's I forgot the recipe, but it's like a cup of soy sauce. What do you guess that it is? It's probably like wine, soy sauce. I want to say sugar, but 3 cups of sugar seems like a lot. Shaoxing wine, soy sauce, sugar, water. It's vaguely, and some aromatics, so it's a cheat. Yeah. Oyster omelets. That makes sense, I guess, from the sea. Oyster omelets also, like, you know, very popular in like, Thailand too. So very popular everywhere. And then peanut sauce noodles, which I feel like is a thing all over China as well, but maybe this particular region, I don't know, has it. Okay, I'm glad. Fujian feels very like cohesive, which makes sense because it is like that isolated region, so it feels very cohesive. We're gonna go next. Next region, we talk about the Xiang cuisine, which is the cuisine of Hunan. So if you don't know this region, it's pretty much kind of more central China. So of all of these ones by the sea, this one is, you know, it is landlocked. And Hunan being in the center, it's kind of known as one of like the cauldrons. It's like the spice of China. And there's like a Chinese saying, people who are from Hunan probably, like, they just say it all the time. It's a play on words, so it's like 四川人不怕辣，湖南人怕不辣。There you go. So if you take a look at this region, like as a whole, you take a step back and you just generalize it, Hunanese cuisine, seemingly, it is spicy. It is spicy, it is greasy, it is heavy, it is oily. And people like it like that. And it's interesting because sometimes like I'll watch shows like 点西小哥 from Yunnan, and the way that they start a dish is to just like, couple cups of like just like lard, boop, or like couple cups of oil, and you just start it like that. And sometimes they don't even like filter it out afterwards. Sometimes it just becomes a part of the dish, which is so different from various regions. But what they say about the spice compared to Hunan to Sichuan is, with the Sichuanese, they have the Sichuan peppercorn in them, so the spice is a little bit like that numbing spice. With Hunan, it's like a dry spice. It is like chili spice. And I do think in researching it that they will say that the Sichuanese, they do have like some of the most spicy foods, but sometimes there's like a variety, whereas with Hunan, it almost feels like every dish that you eat is just like spicy, 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 spicy. So we didn't talk about the topography, the geography. So Hunan is surrounded by mountains and hills on the east, south, and west. So that occupies more than 80% of the province. Hunan, home to birthplace of Mao, so lots of revolutionaries from this area. It's reported that he ate his watermelon sprinkled with chili. It also ranks #1 in China's provinces for rice production, so that kind of shows you a little bit of the weather. So it has a lot of mountains and hills, but it's also on the south bank of the Yangtze River. So it does have a humid subtropical weather with short, cool, damp winters and very hot and humid summers. Plenty of rainfall, so it's just heavy. You can divide up the province into different cuisine styles as well. Obviously, it's still a very big region, but generally they say along the Xiang River, which is more towards I'd say like the eastern side of Hunan, Changsha, which is along that, which is one of the big cities there. These places tend to eat a lot more spicy and a lot more oily, whereas towards the kind of like the western side of Hunan, they eat less spicy and more preserved ingredients. Famous foods from the Hunan area, obviously Mao's pork belly, which is kind of like a red braised pork belly again. So it is available in other regions as well. I think some of it is marketing as well. You have the Dong'an chicken, which is chicken made with chilies and vinegar. So we'll explore that as we kind of look into each of these. You have steamed fish head with pickled chilies. That's one of them. Changsha stinky tofu. So this is a black, those that don't know what stinky tofu is, it's essentially like fermented tofu. I think how you make it is you make tofu, you dip it into a brine so that you get some kind of flavoring in it as well. And then it's allowed to ferment and kind of create this funk. And so Changsha stinky tofu, they say it's soaked in brine containing bamboo shoots, shiitake mushrooms, koji, and like soybean flour. And so you ferment that, and it becomes this magical thing. Usually people that have eaten stinky tofu will say that the smell is a lot more potent than actually the taste. Like once you taste it, you're like, oh yeah, it's kind of just like tofu with some flavoring. But when you smell it, like out on the streets, smacked cucumbers, probably for all of the spice, just to deal with the spice. And then you have sweet and sour spare ribs, which I think that they also kind of associate like General Tso's chicken to this region as well. But again, it seems some of these dishes seem fairly recent. And so it will be interesting to kind of explore like, yeah, what we've talked about, and then some of the maybe, I don't know, like less known dishes. We talked about yesterday, like in terms of using chilies, obviously chilies are not from China, chilies are from the Americas. So during kind of that like Columbian exchange, late 16th century, so like end of 1500s was when a lot of the Portuguese and like the Dutch sailors, sailed around from America and then brought chilies over to China. So prior to that, I think I don't know what they did in Hunan, but prior to that, it would be whatever kind of maybe peppers. Maybe it was more like peppers and less kind of like chilies. I don't know. I'm just gonna have to look into it, but we don't have time, and I'm overwhelmed by what we're already talking about. We have the last one. So the last of our 8 regions is going to be the province of Anhui. So Anhui, if you look at the map, it is kind of, it's just inland to the west of Shanghai. It's one of China's smallest provinces, so we'll go into why it was chosen as one of kind of the big 8. But topography-wise, it is quite diverse. To the north, you have the North China Plains. To the south, you have some mountain ranges. There's, hills and whatnot in between. And so because of that, the temperature is also quite diverse as well, with the north being a little bit more temperate. I would say that with Anhui, things that showed up quite often in my research is that it's known to be a poorer area, and so historically, like a lot of the peasant food was from this area. There's a version of beggar's chicken that is also from the Anhui region. They say that the cuisine, another kind of known thing is that the cuisine relies less on kind of farming and more on gathering. In terms of their cooking method, they're known to make more stews, slow-cooked dishes, braises, rather than fried dishes, stir-fried dishes or deep-fried dishes. I think that they tend to use more herbs, and it made sense because there was a kind of like a travel vlog that I was watching, and they were topping off just like noodle dishes with these herbs that I was not familiar with. Like it wasn't just normally like, scallions or parsley or coriander or something. It was just like these different herbs. So it'll be interesting to look into that. Why it was brought into the Great 8, even though it's such a small region and probably a more humble region, is during the Qing dynasty, last dynasty again of China, 1644 to 1912. But there were a lot of merchants that arose from this era, from this dynasty, and so the merchants would be by Anhui and was able to really be like, oh yeah, this food is really good, and then kind of distributed it to the rest of China while they were traveling, and so it eventually became a Great 8. Possibly home to tofu. There's like a folklore about a prince from a county, from the Shou County, and that county was dubbed the hometown of tofu, so it could be that. But it's also home to something called hairy tofu. I'm sure most of you, if you like tofu, have seen vlogs of this, but it's a kind of fermented, probably stinky tofu that they put different spores on it, and then after it's been left for a while, it creates these like white hairs, these little, so it's very interesting to look at. But then afterwards, what people do is like, you just stick it in a jar and you pour like some brine over it. So so like all of the hairs kind of disappear anyways. Yeah, and there's just another story that, like stinky tofu might have been created by an Anhui scholar that like failed his exams and then sold stinky tofu to Beijing. There's a lot of these stories, which is fun to explore for us when we go into each region like further, because I think like everybody wants to claim like, oh, it's that dish is from here, that dish is from here, but obviously, famous for using ham and rock candy. Rock candy is just sugar, but it's like a crystallized sugar, so it's not really as sweet. Famous for using ham and rock candy to flavor their dishes. Salty, fresh. Lots of forests uses wild herbs, so to flavor in their dishes. Famous foods we talked about again: hairy tofu, red cooked chicken, egg dumplings, which we've made before. So the dumplings, instead of using like a wheat or some kind of like a grain dough as your wrapper, they use like a thin layer of egg. Yeah, they make like kind of like a thin, it's kind of like a crepe, but it's made from egg. It's just thin layer of egg and then they kind of wrap it up, and you make it in a ladle. It's a very neat process. Possibly home to potato starch noodles, I don't know, stinky mandarin fish, steamed stone frog. Interesting. Anhui is one of those regions, like, I've never looked into Anhui before, like, never. I don't know anything about their foods short of this, like, one vlog that I was like, definitely from Anhui. So it seems like, you know, because like the way that I eat, I'm quite like a boring eater. I like a lot of like stews, braises. I don't like oily things. I like a lot of like plain kind of, you know, foods and whatnot. So I really do feel like this region could be the region for me, but I have no idea. So it will be interesting to maybe like look into that. And also, you know, as we go, I'm just like looking at all of these dishes, and I'm always like, oh, it's always just like fish or chicken or spare ribs. So it may be difficult for us to recreate it because it's like pointless. I can just, you know, like I can buy some like fake meats and some fake chicken and then kind of infuse it that way. But I would like to explore the flavors. I would love to look into vegetarian dishes in each region. Maybe I should have done that. Anyways, this is a good start to what we have, and yeah, like I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know if you have any questions. Chances are I won't know the answers to them. I'll just look it up for you and then write it back to you. So if you need a professional researcher, here I am. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this. I mentioned yesterday like how best to use kind of this general video of what we've done is, again, look into the vloggers that you watch, people that are visiting China or people that cook in China that you follow. Just find out where they're from, like, or not even like the specific province, but you can just find out like what are the areas of China that they're from, and then start kind of creating like a little database for yourself, or like write down some of these recipes and see like, okay, like in this particular region they do it like this, they use these particular methods, or they use typical ingredients. I think is more clear for people, because like these dishes, who knows like from what, you know, what time they come from. It seems like most of them are quite recent, but one thing that you can see are ingredients that people use, like based on region. Sometimes they can be quite different, and so that's just like good to note. And you know, also their cooking styles and everything. Yeah, it's really just to organize. It's just so that we don't like haphazardly just be like, oh yeah, that's Chinese food, that's Chinese food, that's Chinese food. It's good to be like, oh yeah, that is from, you know, Anhui, that is from Zhejiang. Okay, that's it. Oh god, I'm sitting currently on my trash can because I find that it is small and so it can fit in between the table and this thing, but the top of it, it just falls in. I'm just gonna break my trash can. Okay. Now I need to edit like 50 minutes of material. It's fine. I'm gonna leave. Goodbye. I hope you have a lovely day. Come back again.